as each country has a plethora of data that helps us to establish the health and the direction of a nation, concerning the financial markets, there are only really specific items that can really have a significant impact on moving the market in a more instantaneous or more reactionary manner once the report comes out. And these are what are called market moving indicators. So we have effectively two categories. We have market moving indicators. We have non-market moving indicators or non-market moving data. And although all of them combined collectively have an impact on the health of a nation, as we are trading foreign exchange on an intraday basis, some of them we will see have an immediate impact, while others will have more of a long-term impact in the overall valuation of the currency. A market moving economic indicator are specific reports or statistics that are perceived to profoundly reflect the state of an economy. They're titled market moving because when the statistic is publicly announced at a specific time, the financial markets will often respond quite measurably and sometimes very, very dramatically to the report. What I'm going to do now is these are listed in your books, and I just want to give you a list of some of the market moving economic indicators that exist within the various regions that we primarily focus on, primarily the G7 regions. And what you'll see is you'll see some consistencies among the lists, and I'll just quickly run through them because I know you can read, and you certainly can do some research. And if you buy the piece on global fundamentals and economic reports, it steers you to some resource centers where you can have the most thorough or gain the most thorough understanding and detailed information on each of the reports, which includes historical statistics and so forth. But just to give you an idea of some of the things that are closely watched, our consumer price index, which is a reflection of inflation, durable goods orders, the employment situation, which is non-farm payrolls, which many of you may be aware of, gross domestic product for a nation, what are the real estate markets like, industrial production, so what is happening on a manufacturing level, and what is being produced, and how full are they with orders into the future, international trade balance, so flows into and out of the specific region. There's what's called the ISM or manufacturing index, and this is an index within certain areas of the U.S. There's a couple of them, of how full our manufacturing plants are and how productive they are with orders at the time being. Personal income and outlays, producer price index, retail sales and food services. Of course, interest rates. Interest rates have a very profound effect on the movement and speculation in exchange rates, and we'll probably touch on that at some stage throughout this course, the impact of interest rates on the currency crosses. We have some sentiment surveys like the University of Michigan Sentiment Survey, as well as the Philadelphia Fed Survey, which is a business sentiment survey. These are U.S. economic indicators, and for the most part, these are market moving indicators that can have an immediate impact or a longer term impact. Looking at the Eurozone now, we've got some different terminology or some different titles to the economic reports. Harmonized Index of Consumer Price, which is their equivalent of the US CPI or an inflation index. IFO, which is a sentiment survey. ZEW, another economic sentiment survey. These are within Germany. The IFO and the ZEW are within Germany. You've got the INSEE in France. Also GDP, Purchasing Managers Index, which is similar to the Purchasing Managers Index in the U.S. Of course, unemployment, industrial production, current account and portfolio flows, so inflows into the Eurozone region and outflows, and as well interest rates. Japan. In Japan, we have the Tankan survey, which is a quarterly business survey of sentiment and expectations, which is very, very closely watched by the Japanese, tertiary sector industry surveys, GDP, Purchasing Managers Index, unemployment, industrial production, current account, inflows and outflows out of the region, money supply, and interest rates. The reason I'm reading through these is so that you can get a feel for some of the consistencies among the regions and what some of the more important economic factors are that influence exchange rates within that region and the global viewpoint of the health of that country. In the UK, we have claimant account average earnings. Their inflation index is the RPI. It used to be the RPIX, which is now the HICP. Retail sales, producer price index, CIPS, which is a Purchasing Managers Survey on the manufacturing and services industry, a survey of what the health is of that specific sector and how that can echo into the health of the economy. Money supply, balance of payments, housing prices. The Bank of England comes out with a quarterly inflation report. The minutes of the Bank of England, similar to our FOMC minutes in the US, GDP, and once again, interest rates. Switzerland, which is somewhat less focused on, but again, we see CPI, unemployment, balance of payments, GDP, industrial production, Purchasing Managers Index, money supply, and interest rates. However, the Swiss franc is typically more or less correspondent with the euro, as 60 to 80% of its trade is with the Eurozone. Looking at Australia now, we'll start to see some differences. The Westpac, which is a bank in Australia, one of the title banks in Australia, they have an index of consumer sentiment. As you can see, the consumer sentiment and business sentiment surveys can also have a pretty strong effect on the outside view of what's happening within a country. Here we see commodity prices, as the Australian dollar is a commodity. It's a commodity currency or a commodity-driven valued economy. As we see the increase, there's a very strong correlation between the increase in the value of commodity prices, primarily precious metals, and the value of the Australian dollar. And we get into that into a lot of detail in the Global Fundamentals and Economic Reports module. That is a separate module from this one. GDP, employment and unemployment, consumer price index and the reflection on inflation, retail sales, producer price index, trade balance, inflows and outflows from the country, and again, interest rates. As well, Canada. Canada is categorically similar to Australia, where we are very strong in precious metals and commodities, in particular oil. And we have seen the Canadian dollar rally significantly against all other currencies, which has directly corresponded with the increase in the precious metals markets and the oil market and natural gas as well. We're heavily focused on raw materials and the raw materials price index. Ivey, which is a business school at the University of Western Ontario, a very renowned business school, they have a Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing and services. Leading indicators index, commodity prices, energy and precious metals, of course, GDP, unemployment rate, consumer price index, and our inflation. Retail sales, industrial producer price index, so the output of manufacturing production. Our trade balance, approximately 80% is with the US, and historically we have seen a very strong correlation between the Canadian dollar and the US dollar. However, we have seen a significant divergence in this correlation as a result of the rally in precious metals and the value in oil, and the overall global sentiment and global viewpoint of the US economy. And we've seen just a real shift, or a divergent move between the two currencies. In fact, we have seen in let's take 2005 for example, where the US dollar rallied against all other currencies but not against the Canadian dollar. Did not rally against the Canadian dollar. In fact, the Canadian dollar moved generously against the US dollar in spite of the US dollar strength, which was a response to hiking in interest rates at the time. And we may touch on that, but it's covered in detail in the global economics module. As well, interest rates.